We've intercepted laughter on an open band. Belderess's upper mandibles twitched. The war chamber fell into static stillness, like oxygen had been ripped from the room. The projection dome above shimmered with fleet positions and thermal overlays, flickering erratically as if responding to that sentence alone. "Repeat that transmission," the high stratagon growled. Adjutant Corix leaned into the commline node, embedded in his forearm, pupils dilated, pulse visibly rising along the neck ridges. It was human, male, a single burst, 8 seconds, clipped at both ends. "We're triple-checking authenticity against historical phonetic banks." There was no encryption. It was amusement. From where? Mars Transit Corridor. But the signal wasn't localized, it echoed. No one laughed in the command hall. Not in the capital sphere of Crime Pramaxis. Not in the shadow of a dying sun. Not when the reactor towers were flickering in staggered rhythms like failing lungs. Above them, the Dominion's crown jewel, Shipcore Theta 1, shimmered like a stretched blade across the orbital grid. Its propulsion cones stuttered, occasionally firing irregular plasma jets, as if coughing into space. Belderus had seen enough planetary cores decay to recognize the signs. They were spiraling toward collapse. He stood, cloak brushing the obsidian floor like falling ash. "Then this transmission is an insult, a provocation, and we will answer it." Counselor Fess inhaled sharply. "Stratagon, our output fields are—" "I did not ask for a summary of limitations, Counselor. I asked for readiness." There was silence, not out of obedience, but from the tension of withheld truths. Corix glanced at the central neural display, where a simulation of Earth rotated slowly. It had not been updated in centuries. Old data, combustion tech, carbon emissions, patchy satellite clusters. Their last transmission before the Treaty of Silence was a grainy transmission. A man in a dark suit laughing at some local mock drama. He remembered that image more vividly than he should. It was the last time Earth reached out, and now, perhaps, they were reaching again. "They haven't sent anything in over 960 years. Not even automated trade pings." Vull's voice was quiet, almost distant, like it didn't belong in the room. The sensor chief's face was bathed in ultraviolet light from the environmental monitors. "That's what should worry us," Corix added, gaze locked forward. Belderus moved toward the strategy dais. "Their silence is not mystery. It is rot." They withered in isolation. "This is our moment to reclaim dignity." He gestured toward the control pillars, and the room's light dropped into deep navy. Across the outer rim, 20 Dominion fleets were cycling into formation. But unlike past campaigns, the launch was slow, hesitant. Each flagship took slightly longer to align, every orbit slightly more degraded than the last. In private, they all knew the Dominion wasn't advancing. It was consuming its own momentum. Doctrine Officer Renhal gave a short laugh, dry, mirthless. "We send half our strength to scare farmers. If they've advanced, it's with forgotten debris and reconstituted bone tools. Let's not elevate savages into strategists." Corix's voice sliced through. "Then why did they stop talking?" Renhal turned, annoyed. Perhaps they finally understood irrelevance, or died in silence. "Nothing dies that neatly," Vull said, barely audible. He had been the first to notice the thermal anomalies along the asteroid belts, the faint ripple signatures, the gravitational drag inconsistency. He'd flagged it twice. No one had listened. Belderus tapped his claw against the plasma display table. "We depart within the cycle. All battle groups activate phase-linked tracking. Full blackout protocols once we cross the Kuiper field. We show no light, no heat trail, no noise, until we reach Mars. If they're watching, we stay invisible." Voss opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew arguing now meant being marked as weak, and weakness was not permitted. Not when the core fusion engines on the home world had begun to fluctuate mid-cycle. It wasn't a war they were launching. It was a diversion from chaos at home, from hunger, from uprising. Belderus turned back to the laser projection sphere. 1,000 years of silence ends now. We will make them speak again. The fleet launched in muted silence, massive engines cloaked under phase sinks, radiative control grids flexing like biomechanical lungs. Outwardly, the ships looked like jagged obsidian crystals, unforgiving in shape, serrated with rail arm platforms and segmented hull plating. that shimmered under quantum shielding. Inside Fleet Command Nexus 7, Sentinel Drine Tor stood before a sweeping arc of deep space tracking projections. His fingertips danced across a heads-up display, monitoring fleet pulse integrity. The signal relay nodes blinked back with sluggish acknowledgement. Structural lag across 3 heavy carriers. His comms aide muttered, "Ignore it. Push their realignment buffer to max drift tolerance." Tor wasn't interested in fragility. His focus was the anomaly. He scanned the silence. No heat spikes, no emissions, not even passive resonance. The Sol system floated like a grave. "This doesn't feel like decay," Tor muttered. "This feels intentional." Above them, Earth's simulation flickered with archive images. Oceans, storm systems, archaic cities etched in solar panels and broken towers. "Play last known Earth audio," he ordered. It crackled. Then laughter. Not recorded, not synthetic, human, confident, unafraid. It should have meant nothing. A relic. But Tor felt something under it, like the echo of a dare. Corix's voice crackled across the intra-fleet frequency. "Stratagon, we're aligned. Jump trajectory set." Belteris stood alone on the observation deck, watching the asteroid field curve in slow orbit. The ships were positioned just beyond the heliopause now. One blink, and they'd be inside the solar expanse. He stared at the void, then said to no one in particular, "They stopped transmitting." But nothing stops without a reason. He turned to the command well, "Commence breach." The moment the fleet crossed the heliopause, every Dominion officer expected alarms, alerts, resistance signatures, planetary shield flares, kinetic interceptors. Instead, they were met with nothing. Not even starlight shift, just dark. The kind of dark that didn't absorb light. It refused to reflect it at all, like they had entered something not just empty, but unseen. A silence that didn't wait, it watched. And as the Dominion Armada crawled deeper toward the blue planet that once crackled with primitive comms, a truth unspoken began to grow like frost on steel. This wasn't an ambush. It was an invitation, and Earth hadn't been sleeping. It had been listening, waiting. Gravitational drift just increased by a Suro 3 in Sector Theta. Sensor Chief Vol didn't blink as the readout curved like a hairline crack across the leftmost heads-up lens. The anomaly was minor, barely enough to trigger standard deviation alerts, but it was the 3rd deviation in less than an hour. He spoke again, quieter this time. "Something's pulling from the belt." Commander Drine Tor shifted beside him, boots clicking against the carbon-forged flooring of Nexus 7's forward deck. The view ahead displayed Pluto, carved like a frozen scar against the stars. Retreating behind the fleet's formation, Neptune loomed ahead, cloud bands muted under the silent crawl of stars. Tara's jaw flexed. "Tracking signature?" Vul exhaled slowly. "None. But the belt's moving. Rocks shift. That's why they're rocks. Not like this." Below them, Dominion battlecruisers glided in synchronized silence, armor reflecting the slow turn of distant starlight, like ripples on black glass. The vast columns of ships moved as a single formation, structured, flawless, imposing, and still unwelcome. Renhal's voice cut through the bridge like a chisel. "Your readings are ghosts, Vul. Our enemies aren't in rocks. They build towers and fire arrows. We would see something real by now." "Ghosts don't alter gravity," Vul replied, fingers still scrolling through live field simulation data. "We're tracking frame warps across multiple points." Renhal turned toward Belteris, who stood watching the forward field with the cold patience of a monolith. "Stratagon, we are drifting into superstition. We approach a dead system, and our officers whisper of phantoms in orbital rock." Belteris didn't answer immediately. His eyes traced the silhouette of Uranus ahead, its color less vivid than the projections had shown in ancient Dominion records. Its rings were undisturbed, its moons unlit. He gestured to Corix. "Launch probes, 5, silent vector, full passive scan. Aim them toward Earth's orbital shell." Corix nodded, hands moving swiftly across the laser plasma display interface, lining up each trajectory with surgical calm. Deploying. Outside, 5 oblong vessels dislodged from the belly of Nexus 7, silent and stealth-coated, trailing no light, emitting no radiation. They vanished within seconds into the void. 36 minutes passed, nothing returned, no signal loss event, no debris markers, no heat distortion, Nothing. They didn't fail, Vul murmured. They were removed. On the outer decks, the automated ballast stabilizers creaked under torsional shifts. Something somewhere was nudging gravitational resistance against the lead ships. Not enough to move them, just enough to remind them they weren't alone. Drentor turned from the forward console. Stratagon, we need formation recheck. If we lose gravcom sync, the deck lights blinked. Once, a flicker like a breath held too long. It passed. Renhal walked closer to the viewport, arms behind his back. You all speak like children in old ruins. This is theater, a system left to rot in silence. If Earth possessed such mastery, they wouldn't hide behind empty planets and dust trails. Korix didn't turn. What if hiding is the point? Belterus said nothing. He watched the ice fields beyond Neptune. Each ship in the fleet felt wrong, misaligned, like magnets forced against each other's poles. No alarms sounded, no warnings tripped. The silence itself carried too much. Then something shimmered near Mars. A flicker, not of light, but of pattern. Drentor squinted. Sector Sigma 9 just dropped 5 degrees in ambient particle resonance. Could be solar flare wash, Renhal offered. Bored. Solar activity is minimal. Vul countered instantly. But there's thermal residue trailing that drop. Tara's voice sharpened. Someone's been there. Belterus took a single step toward the central display ring. Deploy a scout wing. 4 interceptors. Target that cluster. They launched without ceremony. 4 slender vessels, slicing forward like arrows into the void. They moved fast, agile, vanishing behind Mars's gravitational bow. Then vanished. No transmissions, no pings, no telemetry spikes. 4 ships gone without trace. Renhal's face tight. Glitch in the Comolec grid. Pull back and repeat the incoming data fragment. Torix interrupted, tone shifting. Everyone turned. A stream of static crossed the upper band of the fleet's tactical relay, like frost sliding over a sensor lens. Amid the crackle, 2 words emerged, voiced in a low, unhurried tone. Welcome back. Not shouted, not encoded, not synthetic. Human. No accent, no fear, no hesitation, just greeting. It wasn't the words that broke the air in the chamber, it was the timing. Earth hadn't responded in 1,000 years, and now, in the middle of formation, buried inside a command relay feed, someone had spoken to them. Shut it down, Renhal barked. Too late, Korix replied. It bounced across the full command spectrum. Every ship heard it. Silence crept in again, this time with barbed teeth. Belterus turned slowly, finally addressing the room. It's not a message. Vul looked up. Then what is it? The Stratagon's voice dropped into something nearly reptilian. It's the end of our assumption. The ships drifted, slightly misaligned. Heads-up panels fluttered with sensor flares that didn't align with math. Stellar light bent differently around Jupiter's moons. And still, not a single defense fired from Earth. No fleet launched to intercept. No orbital cannons charged. No noise, no resistance. Just 2 words echoing through the Dominion's fleet like the first drops of a storm. Welcome back. The kind of welcome that doesn't mean return. It means reckoning. Contact, 0 signature, full loss, Sector Kappa 17. The words snapped like static across Fleet Command, Nexus 7, slicing through the murmur of tactical updates. Sentinel Drentor's fingers clenched the armrest. His vision tracked the dissonance blooming across the heads-up arrays. Not red alerts, black voids. One by one, ships simply vanished. No shockwave, no debris field, just mass subtraction. Status? Belterus barked from the command throne, his posture like drawn steel. We're losing carriers, Korix answered flatly. No targeting lock, no energy spikes, they're dissolving. Renhal stormed to the forward tier. Jaws tight, that's impossible. Nothing bypasses our grav shields without frequency adaptation. Then explain what's removing tonnage like chalk dust in wind. The command deck convulsed in motion. Lights dimming, support crew realigning sensor grids with trembling urgency. Mars drifted astern now, a crimson silhouette fading behind them. They'd passed the orbit line minutes ago. Earth was still dark, unmoving, uncaring. It was the space between Mars and the belt that erupted. On screen, shimmering threads emerged. Microscopic shapes at first, filament thin, arcing, and weaving like neural strands igniting in deep brain tissue. But they weren't light, they were absence given shape. We have unidentified kinetics, closing at superluminal drift. Superluminal, Renhal shouted. That's a myth. Phase drift can't pierce field density without. They're not drifting. They're folding. Corix's voice cracked as thousands of trajectories burst across the topographic display, each curve mapped to a different Dominion vessel. The drones didn't chase, they predicted. They weren't attacking, they were converging. Vol leaned into the sensor rail, his breath caught in his throat. They're not targeting heat, they're listening to patterns. And the fleet had been broadcasting constant tactical cycling for over 20 minutes. Shut all non-essential comlec chatter, Tor snapped. Too late. The drones moved like serpents through currents unseen. As they touched the hulls, the effects weren't explosive. They phased through composite armor, bypassing shield resonance entirely. Ships flickered, surfaces liquefied into vapor. Crews screamed into channels, then cut off mid-syllable. One vessel folded inward, collapsing like wet parchment drawn into vacuum. 14 seconds. That's how long it took for 12% of the Dominion fleet to be erased. Not disabled, not damaged. Erased. Route targeting to emergency fallback protocol, Tor ordered. There is no lock, Corix said cold. They're beneath recognition threshold. Belthares stood still, staring at the main projection. Not a single Earth vessel had been sighted. Not one orbital cannon fired. No planetary defense activated. This wasn't a response. It was an execution plan already loaded into memory. Retaliate, Rinhal's voice flared. Full rail payload. Fire on Mars. Flush them from cover. There is no enemy to target, Tor replied, his voice hollowing. Nothing's firing at us. Nothing's broadcasting. Rinhal advanced, fury boiling over. Do something. Fire into the silence. I will not let us drift like blind worms while invisible spears carve through our fleet. Corix looked at him, expression unreadable. Your shouting won't give shape to shadows. Suddenly every heads-up display blinked, not with red or blue indicators, but pale white, a central node override, a foreign signal, not corrupted, not forced. It entered like it belonged. A voice followed, low, steady, calm. You arrived expecting fear. What you found is preparation. It carried no threat, no volume spike, no performative edge, just the weight of a civilization that didn't need to raise its voice. Belthares turned toward the signal console. Identify. Corix spoke slowly. Transmission came from within our own relay, piggybacked through our broadcast sync loop. Encrypted, then decrypted in our native dialect. Instantly. Human? Tor asked. Corix nodded once. There was silence again, but it no longer felt like void. It felt like the pause after judgment. One of the junior tacticians, barely old enough to command a patrol wing, whispered under his breath, "That wasn't a warning." Ville's gaze was fixed on the trajectory patterns. It was history, played forward, all across the grid. The swarm stopped moving. Frozen mid-air, millions of units ceased advance, like dancers frozen mid-step, waiting for the next signal. Belthares swallowed, not in fear but in recognition. They hadn't been ambushed. They'd been measured. He looked toward Earth, still shrouded, still unseen. Behind his teeth, the first taste of doubt bloomed like iron. No shields shimmered, no towers glowed, and yet their fleet had been parsed apart like thread under blade. Vilzeric Dras, Corix said, reading from the decryption stream. Marshal, Unified Human Command. He sent the message. Rinhal stepped back. They shouldn't have this reach. Belthares's hand dropped to the command panel, but he didn't issue an order. The display blinked off. Not disabled, disengaged, like a host leaving a room. The swarm retreated, every drone pulling back in perfect arcs, returning toward the asteroid field like a tide being drawn inward. No explosion followed, no pursuit initiated, just a clean stop. And the space between Earth and Mars remained as silent as before, except now it held the memory of fire. Dren Tor's shoulders sagged, but not from weakness, from understanding. They're not fighting. Belthares's gaze was locked forward. No, they're demonstrating. The quiet returned. You want to understand the silence? Vilzeric Dras muttered, eyes tracing the waveform flickering across his private command deck. Start with fire. The heads-up grid pulsed with Earth's current orbital status, cold and unreadable. His voice wasn't aimed at anyone. The room was empty. The message, archived, spoken for himself. Mars was now behind them. The swarm had returned to the asteroid belt, dormant once again. Dominion forces had stopped firing, though they hadn't retreated. But Vilzeric didn't care about their posture. Not yet. He wasn't thinking of them. Not entirely. He was thinking of Cinderfall. The words still cut into him like it was carved into bone. He closed his eyes. Memory rewound. It had been a bright spring morning over Sol's eastern satellite arch. A dozen orbital mirrors caught the sun's edge like crystal blades, shining across the Pacific. Civilians had gathered for equinox alignment. Children pointing skyward at the triangulation ceremony beamed across 6 continents. Then everything changed in 98 seconds. The first flare came with no warning. Only a tremor in solar mass telemetry. 12 seconds later, satellites began rupturing. By minute 2, the Earth's thermosphere bloomed into ultraviolet chaos, and the comet grid liquefied under pressure. Grid lines vanished. Clocks failed. Vilzarek hadn't been born yet, but he'd heard the audio, the high-frequency scream of ion rupture, the shattering of global silence, and then nothing. He remembered the silence more than the chaos. The flare cascade wasn't natural. Later, Earth's surviving scientists traced the solar event to a set of resonance amplifiers. Small radiation-hardened beacons planted behind Mercury's orbit. They were not human-made. They had been seeded during the early treaty era, encoded in Dominion dialect. We lost everything. Orbit data. Half the population. Vilzarek's voice was steady, but the words tasted like rust. A laser plasma overlay unfurled above his desk. Casualty projections blistered black across continents. 4.2 billion. Entire coastlines evaporated under electromagnetic disruption. Medical systems failed. Pressure seals on arc stations cracked. Agriculture networks dissolved. The Earth didn't scream, it withered. And he remembered the names. Hundreds, but one lingered longest. Jolan Dross, his grandfather. One of the lead engineers at the Borealis Array. Gone in the first sweep. Varric still had the last message, though the audio was fractured. A single sentence broken by static. It's not random, it's then silence. Cinderfall birthed something new. Something that grew in quiet. Earth vanished. No transmissions, no pings, no diplomatic follow-ups. The relay towers were never rebuilt. Humanity didn't call for help. They built in darkness. The Treaty of Silence, never formally ended, had become humanity's opportunity, not for peace, but withdrawal. Hide, build, change. That was the doctrine. Varric stood now in the center of that legacy. He opened the strategic archive, and the chamber around him transformed, not metaphor. The room itself adapted, walls sliding, ceiling shifting. In its center rose a spherical lattice, flickering with the AI's historical compendium. A Dyson shell schematic, unraveled in rotating detail. Hexagonal layers interwoven across asteroid cores, each node embedded with fabrication arrays and silent defense protocols. Sandor Vec, humanity's recluse genius, had designed them without fanfare. He disappeared after the first blueprint was transmitted. Some claimed he'd fused himself into the AI core. Others said he left to terraform the edge systems manually. His machines didn't speak. They simply built. No flare announcements, no launch parades, just movement beneath silence. The AI swarm, quantum-anchored to belt clusters, began with drone production at half speed, then scaled up after every Tressorian star probe failed to return. Earth's surface remained dark, but around Saturn, Neptune and Pluto, the real civilization took form. Varric remembered walking through the Venus Eclipse facility as a cadet, watching endless rows of dormant warforms, suspended in stasis. A cathedral built to patience. We trained the AI in absence, he said softly to the room. Fed it Dominion patterns, simulated every tactical flaw. Let it build its own counters. We gave it only one rule: let them see nothing and imagine everything. That had been the turning point. Not vengeance, strategy. Let fear grow not from confrontation but from the lack of one. No declarations, no threats, just deletion. The AI designed the mesh drones in silence, each one calibrated to interface with molecular resonance, disassembling hulls, not by heat, but by shifting atomic alignment. A craft didn't explode, it unraveled. No warning, no light, just absence. Varric tapped one node on the lattice. A replay of the Mars corridor engagement blinked to life. Soundless, Dominion carriers appeared, then vanished frame by frame. The mesh threads glided in, untouched, unseen. 14 seconds, he said it like a eulogy. It had taken years to compress the attack model, not to kill faster but to require less energy, fewer resources, a war machine built not for fury but for sustainability. It was, by every account, a weapon designed by people who no longer needed to announce themselves. The Earth hadn't fought back. It had been waiting. Varric closed the model and turned toward the forward display. His reflection shimmered faintly in the screen's curve, half-lit, half-shadow. He didn't feel pride. Pride was loud. Earth had abandoned loud things. He felt distance. They had made war obsolete, in public, and infinite and silent. Let the Dominion wonder how many ships existed. Let them estimate wrongly. Let them guess how many of the 27 systems held AI warforms. Let them overcommit. Let them doubt. Let them think Earth was still Earth. And when they did move, when they believed, they understood the limits. Let them find out how wrong they were. All squadrons, execute pattern null. This is not a battle. It's a calibration. Varric Dross's voice sliced across the operations mesh, untouched by static, unhurried by urgency. He stood inside Opseric Eclipse, deep within Europa's sealed core, not for protection but for signal fidelity. Around him, command spectrums shimmered across laser plasma bands, cold, clinical, exacting. He wasn't here to speak. He was here to end a war. From the rim of Neptune to the rings of Saturn, Dominion fleets adjusted formations. 37,000 vessels, now converging into a triple-pronged pincer, meant to encircle Earth's orbital path. They moved in near-perfect symmetry, the kind born of a civilization that worshipped formation over adaptability. But they had miscalculated their theater, because their enemy no longer operated in 3 dimensions. Stratagon Belthares, Reinhal said over private command line. We must force a breach. Their weapons function at molecular intervals. We overwhelm their architecture with velocity and mass. Belthares did not answer. He was watching the map fold. Ships vanished again. Not from strikes but from interruptions. Comm relays stuttered. Not through jamming but resequencing. Their own systems were being rerouted against them, as if their commands had been predicted before launch. The corridor of Dominion transports flickered, then spun, internal stabilizers disrupted. Gravity fields had been compromised. Officers slammed into bulkheads. Weapon crews floated mid-command, helmets twisting with unexpected inertia. Sector Delta lost gravcore alignment, came the report. But no hull breach. No boarding, no signal intercept. Just malfunction. No alarms sounded, no shrieks. Only operational collapse. The human AI swarm had begun its second phase. But there were still no human vessels in sight. Only threads, infrared reflections, mathematical ghosts, unmapped trajectories that teased detection only long enough to deny engagement. Currix, now routed into the Dominion's Edge fleet via silent echo tap, stared at the diminishing order. They're not taking ground, Belthares looked over slowly. No, they're removing options. From Earth's gravity well emerged nothing. From Luna, no signal. But at the asteroid belt a curtain unfurled. Thousands of optical filaments expanded outward like glass stretched thin across stars. The AI had launched mirror array protocol. It wasn't a weapon. It was a statement. The light field simulation projected across 10 astronomical units. Within it, images of war fleets began to manifest. Not drones but illusions crafted with molecular lensing. One ship became 10, 10 became 1,000. Behind Saturn's shadow alone, Dominion sensors detected 85,000 tactical forms. Only 11 existed. Inside the Dominion fleet, command channels lit with arguments, adjustments, emergency pivots. They're bluffing, Reinhal spat. It's reflection, distorted simulations. Light tricks, then fire, Belthares replied. Strike them, prove it. Reinhal hesitated. In that pause, 3 more supply vessels destabilized mid-coordination. Supply lines ruptured, not by fire but by overridden nav commands that mirrored each other's outputs, into direct collision courses. We've lost command alignment, Drine Tor finally said. We are no longer operating as a fleet, we are imitating one. Belthares remained still. His flagship's interior was dim now, laser lines flickering like faint starlight across navigation beams. His thoughts were not with weapons. They were with understanding. The humans had removed themselves from war by turning it into ritualized disassembly. They didn't rage. They dismantled. His display flickered again, and this time a face appeared. Varric Dross, calm, unblinking, half-lit by ice reflection from Europa's surface sense. His uniform bore no insignia. Just black weave, subtle breathing fabric like dormant armor. You were given 1,000 years to think. His voice did not rise. It didn't need to. You chose repetition. We chose silence. Belteres stared back at the man. Not a general, not a conqueror, but an inevitability. Varric continued. You believed we stopped growing because we stopped speaking. But we were listening, learning, preparing. Reinhal's mouth opened again, some protest of principle, of tradition, of doctrine. But the ship's grav lines shifted beneath them again. Just slightly, enough to remind him that the floor could vanish too. Varric tilted his head, just slightly. We made no threats. We issued no ultimatum. We taught our silence to do what your voices never could: change behavior. He lifted a hand, not as a gesture but to access something off-screen. In response, half the mirror array dimmed. The fake fleets faded. All that remained were the original few. The real ones, still enough to finish the job. This isn't conquest. Varric's tone shifted. Less steel, more gravity. This is mercy with teeth. Belteres lowered his eyes. He tapped his own interface. Across the Dominion's battle network, tactical dissolution protocol activated. Ships pulled back, firewalls reset, trajectories rerouted to retreat vectors, weapons de-armed. The AI swarm allowed it, because it didn't need surrender. It had already won the only war that mattered. The war of narrative. Back in the command chamber, Varric stepped away from the console. His breath was slow. From behind him, a signal blinked. Echo Agent Tren confirming network silence across all 27 human systems. No threat detected. No foreign signal intrusion. Dominion surveillance cut by 99. Dross whispered the names again, his ancestors. One by one into the darkness. Not as ritual, as debt repayment. They came looking for an empire to destroy, he murmured. Instead, they found the consequences of survival. What do you want? The words came not from Belteres's mouth, but through his internal relay, compressed into a direct neural stream. The chamber around him was dim, screens flickering with ghosted telemetry, heads-up overlays displaying redundant fallback paths. None of them functional, none of them relevant anymore. The question hung there unanswered for a beat too long. Then Varric's voice returned, not through threat, not through bravado, but as a simple, unhurried truth. Not vengeance, stability. Belteres sat motionless inside his throne pod, shoulders stiff, breath shallow. His fingers grazed the edge of a control collar that no longer responded to his touch. He hated how clear the human's voice sounded across encrypted link, routed through Dominion sub-channels, without triggering a single firewall. Varric didn't speak again immediately. He allowed space, a pause engineered to force Belteres to think rather than react. Outside, the simulated fleet still drifted in optical formation across the mirror array, too vast to attack, too empty to destroy. The Dominion's actual vessels, disconnected from cohesion, now floated like scattered bones. Finally, Varric said, "You've built your empire on forward momentum. We built in layers." Belteres shifted. "And you waited, sat stagnant, while stars passed you by." Varric's tone didn't flinch. "We weren't waiting. We were watching." Belteres's eye membranes contracted. "We suspected the Treaty of Silence wouldn't last." Varric continued. "So we built systems, not weapons, not planets, systems, interlinked command cores, civilian platforms encoded with decoy heat trails. A war model that didn't react to threat, but anticipated behavior." Belteres clenched his jaw. "You buried your voice for a millennium. Why return now?" The laser plasma displays around Varric pulsed faintly, revealing his outline inside a clean, unadorned command interface. No banners, no medals, just bone-deep clarity. "Because you returned to finish what your ancestors started, and we needed you to see what silence creates when memory holds the pen." A data key appeared beside Belteres's left visual field. an offering, not a command. It wasn't encoded in Trisarian syntax, but something more insidious, adapt, written in hybridized mathematical logic that matched Dominion computational structure almost too perfectly. Belderus blinked. It was human, but designed for him to understand. He activated the file. Simulations unfolded, scalable quantum lattice theories, dark energy anchoring, remote AI seeding strategies, material conversion frameworks, developed from zero-point manipulation. Concepts the Dominion hadn't even begun to theorize, let alone implement. This wasn't a trick. It was a gift, or a test. We are not offering peace, Varek said quietly. We're offering tools. Belderus exhaled through tightly drawn nostrils. Why? The response came without delay. Because hatred burns quickly, but regret builds empires that last. The weight of that line landed harder than any kinetic strike. Belderus stood, the gravity-stabilized floor adjusting minutely beneath him. He approached the observation pane. The stars beyond no longer shimmered with grandeur. They stared back, indifferent. Why not finish? He asked. Lo, you've proven your dominance. You dismantled our command structures without spilling blood. Why not cut deeper? On Varek's side, the background dimmed. Not in darkness, but in restraint. This wasn't war theater. This was administrative. Because you were never our real adversary, he said. You were our reminder. Belderus didn't answer immediately. He processed. What would you require in return? Varek looked past the display. Your leadership must adapt, not kneel. This isn't subjugation, it's realignment. The Trisarian leader moved slowly back toward his console. And if we refuse, Varek didn't blink, then our simulations begin again, with higher tolerance settings and fewer offers. The threat wasn't angry. It wasn't even personal. It was simply inevitable. Belderus stared at the command data cube still blinking in his periphery. Behind him, Runhal muttered darkly. We should never have come here. Belterus turned to face him. We didn't come here, we were drawn. Silence followed. For the first time in 300 years, Strategon Belterus felt something deeper than failure. He felt perspective. The connection flickered again. Varrek's voice returned, softer now. We hold no hatred, only memory. Your empire taught us silence, and in that silence we learned to reshape the nature of presence itself. Belterus looked down at the interface before him, the final command hovering, unspoken. Surrender wasn't in their dialect, not directly. The nearest approximation translated to release of directional control. He didn't press it, he didn't need to, because the Dominion had already let go. Varrek closed the channel from his end, not with triumph, not with dismissal, but with something far rarer. Closure. We retreat and our blood becomes ink on their scrolls. Counselor Drol Vess's voice echoed through the amphitheater, with the sharpness of a blade unsheathed. The light from the suspended plasma threads above cast his angular features in shifting amber bands. He stood at the speaker's platform, claws curled into the railing, neck fronds taut with indignation. Dominion pride isn't ceremonial, he continued, scanning the semicircle of senior strategists. It is what separates us from scavengers, from imitators, from this. The last word struck like a lash, its scorn unhidden. Dron Tor sat unmoved, his posture folded but attentive, flanked by war-torn command officers. His armor bore the silent scarring of optical resonance degradation from the earlier phase disruptions. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached to the edge of his chair and activated a data bloom. The central display shimmered into life. No narration, no embellishment. Just Dominion ships listing adrift, gravity systems misaligned, internal structures splintered not by weapons, but by design failure. We weren't outgunned, Tor said finally, voice calm. We were understood. Murmurs rolled through the chamber. No one interrupted, but tension coiled among the ranks like heat beneath tectonic plates. Counselor Tolan Sarek raised a ridge-scaled brow. You call comprehension defeat? Tor's eyes narrowed. I call it preparation, a word we forgot. At the center podium, Belterus remained standing. His silence was heavier than accusation. It had always been his way to wait until the waves crashed before throwing the anchor. Vess jabbed a clawed finger toward him. And you, Strategon, would you let this insult root in our bloodline unchallenged? Would you kneel before Earth's illusions? Beltaris did not answer. Not yet. Instead, he accessed the command node embedded in his forearm. The lights dimmed, and the side wall unfolded into a panoramic field, a feed from the Dominion fleet still stationed at Saturn's outer perimeter. It showed nothing moving, no approaching human vessels, no trace of retaliation, but also no returning Dominion command, just silent, empty, brilliant, suffocating silence. They never pushed, Beltaris said, finally. They only let us fall. That sentence shifted the chamber. The floor panels cooled, the oxygen density recalibrated, as if the entire room had inhaled something heavier than air. Sarek leaned forward. You believe they were offering peace? No, Beltaris said. I believe they were offering judgment, and we failed it. Vess's Franz bristled. Then challenge it. Send a counterwave. Deploy the Fourth Fleet. Drive fire through their moons. Remind them that dominance isn't claimed through whispers and veiled light. Tor stood, not fast, deliberate. The scar near his throat caught the display glow like ash on water. You misunderstand, he said. We haven't been fighting warriors. We've been tested by historians. This was never a battle. It was a lesson. Whispers spread now, discomfort threading through ranks. Once certain of their supremacy, generals exchanged sidelong glances. The oldest of them, some born before the first treaty, looked downward, as if revisiting childhood myths that had returned with teeth. Beltaris raised his hand. The room fell still. He tapped a final code into the interface beside him. The action released a command cascade across the Dominion fleet. Tactical dissolution protocol initiated. No fanfare, no anthem, just raw code. Across the fleet, formation anchors deactivated. Command overlays switched to autonomous drift mode. Weapons systems disengaged. The Dominion would retreat without banners, without pronouncements, without even acknowledging the retreat. It was not surrender, not to them. It was abandoning the theater, before the stage burned further. Vess's voice cracked. You would leave the core systems undefended. Beltaris didn't look at him. We have nothing left they want. Sarek stepped away from the ring, shoulders heavy. And yet they offered us a key. Beltaris nodded. And I intend to send one in return. He activated a final uplink, this time not to his own forces, but toward Earth's encoded channels. Not broadcast, but delivered. A data vault of Dominion's scientific archives. Centuries of physics, failed experiments and foundational misassumptions. A gesture not of alliance, but of concession. Let the humans audit it. Let them know what Treachery had been, and what it never became. A whisper came from one of the outer chamber generals. And what if they mock it? Beltaris turned. His voice was iron-wrapped in resolve. Then let it be a better death than ignorance. Silence followed, but it didn't weigh the same. Because this wasn't mourning, this was reorientation. Beltaris looked out at his council, half broken, half awakened. We called them primitive, but they evolved under pressure. And we basked in inertia. Vess lowered his gaze. His defiance remained, but now it trembled. Not with fear, but realization. They never fired on our cities, Tar said softly. Not once. They didn't need to, Beltaris replied. The chamber lights faded to amber once more. This time, no one spoke, because the question no longer was whether they lost. It was how they would live after. They're moving, Tren said softly. For Saverick didn't turn from the observation deck, where Jupiter hung low and burning, casting deep ochre bands across the hull of the Titan relay station. Far below, the Dominion fleet pulled away, engines silent, configurations broken. They had not spoken since receiving the core archive. They had not responded. They had simply gone. It was enough. Tren stepped forward, his boots making no sound against the kinetic flooring. His voice, calm as ever, carried more weight than usual. Dominion signals have gone dormant. No military commands, no pursuit orders, just background system checks. For Saverick's reflection remained still in the glass. It's done then. Tren hesitated, then added, not entirely. That caught Varick's attention. He turned. The dim light outlined the fatigue, etched into his face, though none of it reached his posture. Explain. Tren activated a narrow-band projection. Above his wrist, a thin ribbon of light split into a triangular formation, 3 separate points, blinking faintly in orbital sync. During the mirror array launch, our swarm intercepted residual field distortions, not Dominion, not ours, For Savaric's brow furrowed. Signal was observing, watching us both. Quantum triangulation protocol confirms at least one source was routed beyond this galactic arm, possibly extragalactic. No dramatics, no alarm. But gravity shifted between them, not physical, not measurable, just understood. So the silence wasn't only ours. Tren nodded once. For a long moment Vurik said nothing. His eyes drifted back to the retreating armada, reduced to silhouettes, stripped of arrogance. They weren't the enemy anymore, just a mirror, a warning from the past. His voice, when it came, was low and unadorned. Prepare observation strands, all edge systems, passive surveillance only. Already deployed, Tren said. Multiple redundancies, none traceable. For Savaric exhaled. The room felt colder now, not from threat, but revelation. This wasn't the end. It was the perimeter. He tapped into the relay node embedded in the station's wall. A heads-up stream unfurled. Names, dates, data logs, his lineage, every ancestor taken by Cinderfall, every life lost in silence. One by one, he recited them aloud, voice steady. At the final name he paused. This wasn't revenge, he whispered, barely audible over the station's passive systems. This was the warning. The laser display dimmed. Outside, the stars returned, unblinking. Behind him, Tren spoke for the last time that day. What now, Commander? For Savaric's gaze didn't waver. Now we find the others. And for the first time in 1,000 years, Earth reached outward, not in fear, not in anger, but with understanding.